The grand gala hall of the Metropolitan Arts Foundation was alive with murmurs of conversation and the gentle clinking of crystal glasses. The golden chandeliers above bathed the guests in a warm glow, their reflections dancing on the polished marble floors. It was an evening of elegance, where dignitaries, celebrities, and philanthropists gathered to celebrate the foundation's latest achievements in supporting young artists. Melania Trump entered gracefully, her presence commanding but never overbearing. Dressed in an ivory silk gown that shimmered under the golden lights, she moved with quiet confidence, exchanging polite smiles and nods. She was used to the public eye, used to the scrutiny, but tonight wasn't about her. Tonight was about something bigger, a cause she believed in. As she made her way to her reserved seat in the front row, her gaze swept across the crowd, taking in the familiar faces of politicians, socialites, and prominent business leaders. At the far end of the hall, near the entrance, an elderly woman stood, slightly hunched, clutching her invitation with frail fingers. She was dressed modestly, her silver hair pinned in an elegant twist. Her eyes, though tired, held a quiet dignity as she scanned the room, searching for her place. Melania noticed the woman's uncertainty, the way the usher hesitated, glancing around as if unsure where to seat her. It was a moment that could have easily been overlooked in the midst of the glittering event, but Melania didn't hesitate. Without a word, she rose from her chair and made her way toward the woman. "Excuse me," she said softly, offering a warm smile. "Would you like to sit here?" The woman looked up, startled for a moment, before recognizing the familiar face before her. A hush fell over those nearby as they watched the unexpected interaction. Guests whispered among themselves, their curiosity piqued. "Oh, my dear, I couldn't possibly," the woman protested, her voice gentle but firm. "This is your seat." Melania shook her head lightly. "Please, I insist." Her voice carried a quiet sincerity, one that left no room for argument. The usher, still holding the guest list, fumbled for words. "Madam, we can find another," but Melania had already made her decision. She placed a gentle hand on the elderly woman's arm, guiding her toward the chair. The woman hesitated only a moment longer before nodding in gratitude. As she settled into the seat, Melania offered her a reassuring smile before stepping back. What happened next sent ripples through the crowd. Before anyone could offer her another place, Melania simply took a step to the side and stood. She did not demand another chair, nor did she seek special treatment. Instead, she remained composed, graciously blending into the crowd, standing quietly as if it was the most natural thing in the world. Gasps of surprise spread among the guests. Some scrambled to offer her a chair, but she waved them off with an elegant gesture. The moment, though small, carried a weight far greater than words. It was a simple act of kindness, one that no one had expected. Then, from somewhere in the hall, the sound of soft applause began. It was hesitant at first, as though people weren't sure if they should acknowledge what they had just witnessed. But within moments it spread, first a few, then a dozen, then the entire room rising to their feet, clapping in appreciation. Melania met their eyes with quiet grace, her expression unreadable yet warm. She hadn't done it for applause. She hadn't done it for spectacle. She had simply seen someone in need and acted. As the evening continued, whispers of admiration filled the air. Reporters hurried to note the moment, guests spoke of it with awe, and somewhere in the sea of people, the elderly woman sat, her hands clasped together, feeling the warmth of a kindness she had not expected. Melania remained standing for much of the event, speaking with guests who approached her, engaging with artists who shared their dreams, and never once making a fuss about what she had given up. Because, in truth, she had lost nothing. Instead, she had gained something far greater: the quiet, unspoken respect of those who had witnessed a simple act of generosity. And as the night carried on, that moment remained, etched in the minds of all who had seen it. Because sometimes, the smallest gestures left the deepest impact. As the applause faded and the gala resumed, murmurs of admiration still lingered in the air. Melania moved through the room with her usual grace, engaging in conversations with artists and patrons alike. Yet, beneath the polished surface of the evening, a subtle shift had taken place. The moment when she had offered her seat to the elderly woman had not only captured the crowd's attention but also sparked emotions that simmered just beneath the surface, some of them not as charitable as the gesture itself. Across the hall, Eleanor Wexley, a prominent socialite and longtime donor, observed Melania with thinly veiled scrutiny. She had always prided herself on being the center of attention at these events, her presence commanding the kind of admiration she had carefully cultivated over the years. But tonight, the spotlight had shifted. Whispers about Melania's kindness spread through the elite circles like wildfire, and Eleanor found herself seething at the effortless grace with which the former First Lady had won over the crowd. "That was quite the performance," Eleanor murmured, swirling her champagne as she leaned toward her companion, a slickly dressed investor named Richard Dane. "Selfless, almost saintly, wouldn't you say?" Richard chuckled, reading between the lines. "You sound like you don't believe it." Eleanor smiled tightly. "Oh, I believe she's charming. That's her gift, isn't it? But let's not pretend she isn't aware of the effect she has. This was calculated." Richard tilted his glass. "If it was, it worked. People love her for it." Eleanor's gaze darkened. She had spent years perfecting the art of influence, ensuring that her name remained synonymous with high society. To be overshadowed, even for a moment, was intolerable. Meanwhile, Melania continued to navigate the room, oblivious to the undercurrents swirling in her wake. As she spoke with a young painter showcasing her work, she felt a presence beside her. Michael Stanton, a media mogul known for his ability to shape narratives with a single headline. "Mrs. Trump," Michael greeted smoothly, his eyes sharp with interest. "That was quite the moment earlier." Melania met his gaze with a polite nod. It was the right thing to do. He smiled, but there was something calculating in his expression. It certainly captured people's attention. These days, a single act of kindness can define a person's image. "I imagine the press will be eager to run with it." She understood the implication immediately. He was offering her control over the story, the opportunity to frame it in whatever light she chose. But she had never been one to manipulate goodwill for publicity. "There's no need," she said simply. "The moment speaks for itself." Michael's smile remained, but she saw the flicker of surprise in his eyes. He had expected her to seize the opportunity. Instead, she had dismissed it without hesitation. Across the room, Eleanor watched the exchange, her mind working quickly. If Melania wasn't going to capitalize on the moment, perhaps someone else would. As the evening progressed, tensions simmered in quiet exchanges and unspoken rivalries. A rumor began to weave its way through the crowd, subtle at first, then growing. Someone murmured that the elderly woman was a planted guest, an orchestrated moment to bolster Melania's image. Others speculated that she had refused another seat to prolong the attention. It was a whisper campaign, carefully crafted and set into motion with expert precision. Melania noticed the shift in energy, the way some guests now regarded her with skeptical eyes. The warmth from earlier had cooled, replaced by murmurs behind half-hidden smiles. She had been in the public sphere long enough to recognize when a narrative was turning. Still, she remained composed. She had faced worse, endured more. She wouldn't dignify baseless rumors with a reaction. But the night was far from over. As the gala reached its peak, an unexpected guest arrived, someone who carried a weight that could not be ignored. Senator Charles Redford, a powerful figure with deep political ties, stepped into the room, his gaze sweeping across the elite crowd. He had always been a vocal critic of the Trumps, and his sudden presence sent a ripple through the gathering. Eleanor wasted no time. She approached him with a practiced smile. "Senator, what a surprise. I wouldn't have expected you here tonight." He nodded, accepting a drink from a passing server. "I like to keep an eye on the cultural scene, and from what I hear, there's been quite the show tonight." Her smile widened. "Indeed. You know how these events are. So much is left unsaid, but the right people always hear the whispers." His eyes flickered with interest. "And what whispers would those be?" Eleanor leaned in slightly, lowering her voice just enough. "Let's just say not everything is as spontaneous as it seems." The seed was planted, and as the night stretched on, it began to grow. The gala had reached its crescendo. The orchestra played a soaring melody, the lights dimmed to a golden hue, and guests reveled in the final hours of an evening designed to dazzle. But beneath the surface, tension crackled like a storm gathering strength. Melania stood near one of the tall windows, a glass of sparkling water in her hand. She had long since sensed the change in atmosphere, the shift from admiration to suspicion, from warmth to scrutiny. Whispers had turned into quiet, knowing glances. Someone was manipulating the narrative, twisting her simple act of kindness into something insidious. She had faced this before, the way perception could be shaped and distorted. It no longer surprised her. But what did surprise her was how quickly it had spread. Someone had planned this. Then, the moment arrived. A journalist from a well-known media outlet, emboldened by the murmurs swirling through the room, stepped forward with the microphone in hand. Her name was Vanessa Moore, a sharp-witted, ambitious reporter with a talent for turning whispers into headlines. She had been waiting for the perfect moment, and now, with Senator Redford watching from across the hall, she saw her opportunity. "Mrs. Trump," Vanessa began, her voice smooth but edged with something sharper. "A moment of your time?" Melania turned gracefully, her expression unreadable. "Of course." Vanessa's eyes gleamed. Cameras from nearby press members subtly adjusted their focus, sensing something was about to unfold. "You created quite the moment earlier, offering your seat to a guest in need," Vanessa said, her words slow and deliberate. It was an inspiring gesture, but some are questioning whether it was entirely spontaneous. A hush fell over the immediate crowd. Conversations quieted. Eyes turned. This was it, the attempt to unravel her, to turn generosity into calculation. Melania remained poised, though she felt the weight of every gaze upon her. "Kindness should never be questioned," she said evenly. "It should be encouraged." Vanessa tilted her head. "Of course. But rumors are circulating that the elderly woman may have been placed there intentionally, that this moment was, in fact, orchestrated, that you refused other seating options to prolong the attention. Do you have any response to those claims?" Silence. The kind that stretched, heavy and expectant. Then, a voice cut through the tension. "That's a lie." The elderly woman herself had stepped forward. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice was steady. "I don't know who's spreading these rumors, but I was not planted by anyone. I arrived alone, expecting to sit in the back. Mrs. Trump saw me standing and offered her seat without hesitation. It was the kindest thing anyone has done for me in a long time." The words landed like a stone dropped into still water, sending ripples through the crowd. A murmur of surprise spread among the guests. Vanessa hesitated for a fraction of a second, just long enough for doubt to flicker in her expression before regaining her composure. "That's certainly good to hear. But surely you understand why some might question the optics of such a moment." Melania met her gaze steadily. "Only those who cannot recognize true kindness would question it." A sharp inhale rippled through the gathering. It was not an aggressive statement, not an accusation, but it was clear. The room shifted. The tide, for a moment against her, now turned in her favor. Eleanor Wexley, watching from the sidelines, felt her control slipping. She had planted the doubt, crafted the narrative, but it was unraveling too fast. Senator Redford, his arms crossed, observed everything with unreadable eyes. He had come here expecting to witness a downfall. Instead, he saw a woman standing in the storm, unshaken. Vanessa, sensing she had lost her moment, forced a tight-lipped smile. "Well, thank you for your time, Mrs. Trump. I'm sure the story will speak for itself." "It usually does," Melania replied smoothly. As Vanessa retreated, whispers filled the space she left behind. Some guests exchanged guilty looks, realizing they had been too quick to doubt. Others nodded in quiet approval, recognizing grace under fire when they saw it. Melania turned to the elderly woman, placing a gentle hand on her arm. "Would you like to stay for the rest of the evening?" The woman smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "I would love that." And with that, the moment passed. But its impact lingered, reshaping the night in ways no one had anticipated. As the night drew to a close, the gala guests slowly began to disperse, their murmurs lingering like the final notes of a fading melody. But the events of the evening had left an undeniable imprint. Melania remained poised, speaking with a few well-wishers who approached her with quiet words of support. Though she smiled graciously, she could feel the weight of the night pressing against her. The attempt to discredit her had been swift, ruthless even, yet it had failed. Still, she knew how the game was played. Doubt, once planted, could never be entirely erased. The elderly woman, now seated comfortably with a few other guests, watched Melania with gratitude. "You have a strength about you," she said softly when Melania approached her once more. Not everyone would have handled that with such grace. Melania offered a small smile. People will always believe what they want to believe. Nearby, Eleanor Wexley stood at the bar, swirling the last of her champagne, her carefully constructed facade beginning to crack. She had orchestrated this, had planted the seeds of doubt, yet somehow it had slipped through her fingers. Worse, she now saw the way others looked at her, some with suspicion, others with outright disappointment. Richard Dane, her closest ally in the evening's scheme, leaned in with a sigh. That didn't go as planned. She exhaled slowly, keeping her expression composed despite the frustration building inside her. "No, it didn't." He chuckled. "You underestimated her." She didn't respond. She didn't have to. The truth was obvious. Melania had handled the situation with a quiet strength that Eleanor hadn't anticipated. There was no scandal, no disgrace, only a reaffirmation of her grace under pressure. And now, it was Eleanor who stood exposed. Across the room, Senator Redford observed everything with his usual calculated gaze. He had been ready to use the night's events as leverage, had anticipated a moment of weakness he could exploit. But Melania had given him nothing. No outburst, no scandal, no misstep. And now, rather than a woman caught in controversy, she stood untarnished, her dignity intact. He turned to Vanessa Moore, the journalist who had tried to break the story open. "You overplayed your hand," he muttered. Vanessa, her confidence shaken, adjusted the strap of her bag. "It wasn't my fault. The rumor had traction. I didn't think she'd handle it that well." Redford's expression remained unreadable. "Next time, think harder." The guests who had initially entertained the rumors now shifted their stance. Some subtly distanced themselves from Eleanor and those who had spread the doubts. Others, embarrassed by their willingness to believe so quickly, avoided Melania's gaze altogether. As Melania prepared to leave, a few of the younger artists she had spoken with earlier approached her. One of them, a young woman whose paintings had been displayed that evening, hesitated before speaking. "I just wanted to say, I almost believed the rumors." Her voice was small, uncertain. "But then I saw how you handled it, and I realized how easy it is for people to twist something good into something suspicious." Melania met the young woman's eyes, her expression softening. "It's always easier to believe the worst in people, but that doesn't mean we have to." The young artist nodded, as if absorbing the lesson. As Melania stepped out into the crisp night air, the city's lights glittering in the distance, she took a deep breath. The night had tested her, but she had endured. She had always known that kindness could be mistaken for calculation, that grace could be seen as strategy. But she would not change who she was. Eleanor Wexley watched from the entrance of the gala, her lips pressed into a thin line. Tonight had not gone her way, but she knew that society was fickle. Reputations rose and fell on the whims of perception. Still, as Melania disappeared into the night, Eleanor couldn't shake the nagging realization that she had lost something more than just a fleeting victory. She had miscalculated, not just Melania's resilience, but the way people responded to authenticity, and that was not so easily undone. As the evening faded into memory, the story would be told and retold, dissected in headlines and whispered in elite circles. But in the end, only one truth remained. Grace had withstood the storm, and no amount of whispers could change that. In the days following the gala, the incident remained a topic of discussion. Articles were written, op-eds debated the meaning of kindness in an age of skepticism, and media outlets dissected every moment of that night. Some journalists attempted to keep the controversy alive, but the facts spoke for themselves. Melania Trump had done nothing but offer her seat to someone in need. Public opinion, once swayed by whispers, settled on admiration. The elderly woman's testimony, combined with Melania's own unwavering composure, had turned the tide. What had been meant as an attack had only reinforced her image as a woman of quiet dignity. Eleanor Wexley, however, found herself on the losing end. Those who had once orbited her social sphere with eager devotion now kept their distance. There was no grand scandal, no major fallout, but in the world of high society, perception was everything. The attempt to undermine Melania had failed, and in the process, Eleanor's own credibility had been tarnished. At a private luncheon a week later, she found herself seated among acquaintances who now spoke in guarded tones around her. She could see it in their eyes, the doubt, the quiet judgment. She had miscalculated, and in their world, such mistakes were not easily forgotten. Senator Redford, ever the pragmatist, distanced himself from the situation entirely. He had no interest in aligning himself with a failed smear attempt. If anything, he respected Melania more now than he had before. She had faced scrutiny and walked away untarnished, something few in public life could claim. As for Melania, she continued forward, unchanged by the ordeal. She had long understood the nature of perception, how easily good intentions could be twisted, but she refused to let cynicism dictate her actions. A few weeks after the gala, she received a letter. It was from the elderly woman, thanking her once again, not just for the seat, but for reminding her that kindness, no matter how questioned, still had a place in the world. Melania read the letter in quiet reflection. The world could be harsh, full of doubt and suspicion, but that did not mean one should stop doing what was right. As the media cycle moved on and the story became just another moment in time, one thing remained clear. True grace could not be manufactured, nor could it be destroyed by mere whispers. It endured. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more compelling narratives. Thank you for watching.